common problem you'll face with video graphics will be exposure. By harnessing a levels adjustment, you can fix color balance as well as overall balance of light and dark within an image. Let's see how flexible and fast a levels adjustment can be.
The levels command is one of the most powerful adjustments that you can make to an image. While it is essentially simple, it will allow you to fix many common problems in a video image. Let's give it a shot on this image here. I can choose Image, Adjustments, Levels, and this brings up the Levels dialog box. There are 5 primary sliders that you need to be concerned with. Up here is the input levels, and this allows you to adjust the black point, the middle gray or gamma point, and the white point. Pulling these sliders one way will create a new change in the image. For example, as I pull the black slider in, areas that were not dark now become darker and darker, as more of the image details are mapped to black. Conversely, pulling the white slider in takes areas that were not very bright and brightens them. And inherently, this is no different than, say, a brightness and contrast adjustment. Let's hold down the Option or Alt key and click Cancel, which will reset the image. Where the more powerful adjustment comes from is this middle slider, which essentially exposes the midtones, allowing you to brighten or darken the middle area of an image. When you combine these with the eyedroppers here, for example, we could sample to set a white point by clicking on the white point dropper here, and then coming to the image and finding something that should be white and clicking. And notice how that area gets mapped to white. Now I'm going to hit Cancel for a second and change a preference that is my personal choice. You notice currently we have little eyedropper icons. I find an accurate sample point to be easier to understand. So let's click Cancel and choose Preferences, Cursors. And we'll go ahead and choose our other cursors to be precise. And click OK. Let's invoke that levels dialog again by pressing Command or Control L to bring it back up. And now when I take the white point eyedropper and click on something that should be white, I have a much more accurate sample. There we go. And let's take the black point dropper and find something that should be black, like this dark shadow in his coat. And now we can go ahead and adjust the middle. And that did a pretty strong adjustment. However, the whites got a little too bright. And this is where the output slider can come in. By pulling the output slider down, areas that are pure white get knocked down to a more manageable off-white. Somewhere in there looks pretty good to me. If you'd like to toggle and see a before and after, simply click the Preview checkbox so you can see the original state or the new state of the image. When satisfied, you can click OK. Now, before we do that, there's a couple other things I'd like to mention. If you're in a hurry, you can always try the Auto checkbox. Although, to be honest, Auto will not often work very well, because Photoshop may not be able to detect a good point to reference. So let's go ahead and redo this image. Take the white eyedropper, and I'll click. Let's use the flowers this time here. There we go. That kind of did it. Let's try a different one. Go off this poster. Good, much better. And take the black dropper here. Find a dark shadow like in his jacket. Adjust the midpoint. And let's go ahead and back the whites down a little bit so they're not as intense. There we go. And click OK. Now that change worked well, but we made it in a destructive fashion, and the image was adjusted destructively. Repeated adjustments to this image can then lead to further degradation. Let's go ahead and revert to the original state. A quick way to do that is to call up the History palette. And at the top of the History palette, you can go ahead and click on this snapshot, which will take it back to how the document was when you opened it. Let's close that. Now, we'll do the same thing again with a Levels adjustment layer. Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels. And this will allow us the exact same interface. We can click and find our points again, adjust the middle, tone the whites down, and click OK. But now, if we look over here in the Layers palette, we'll see that this is a layer that can be turned off or on. It can also be faded by adjusting its opacity to split the difference on the effect if you overdo it. And that works very well. Similarly, we may want to just adjust part of this image, such as his face here. I can choose Select Color Range and click on his face. Makes an initial selection. Let's hold down the Shift key and drag around his face a little bit more to make more of a selection. There we go. Soften that with the fuzziness slider. We'll click OK. And let's add one more adjustment layer for levels. And I can adjust that independently, opening up the face just a little bit more or darkening it down. Let's take a little more open. And click OK. And if you look closely at the Layers palette here, you'll see that because we made a selection before applying the adjustment layer, it has been isolated to just those areas of the selection. So what's white on this layer mask is being affected, and what's black is being ignored. Let's toggle that off and on so you can see how that subtle but important adjustment really helped us bring out that last little detail in the face. Since I've got a selection, let's go ahead and Command or Control click on its thumbnail to load it again. And this time, I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment. And let's put a little saturation back in the face, and we'll roll the hue to purple, back towards the skin tone, just a little bit beyond the center point there, and click OK. And you see we've further subtly enhanced the face region. And there you have adjustment layers with levels. Very useful in correcting video images. I've got one more image here that we're going to go ahead and enhance. Let's throw this adjustment layer away and we'll start over. Now this photo has substantially faded over time. The reds have been left behind while the other inks have faded. One way to check this is to call up the histogram palette. Let's pull this over. And if I click up here on the submenu, I could say, Show me all channels. And this data is very useful. You can see that we have a gap over here in the shadow area for our reds, while in the green and blue channels, there's a lot of missing detail in the highlights area. Let's go ahead and add a new adjustment layer for levels. And this time, we're going to make adjustments on a per channel basis. So I can click the channel menu and choose red. There's that gap. Think of this as a teeter-totter, and you want to put the black point right where this data starts to rise. Not at the end here where it's flat, but where it starts to rise and actually go up. Same with the white point. And then think of this as the teeter-totter. You have to move this left or right to find balance. This little spike right here makes me think that I need to move this a little bit to the right. Let's just tweak that a little bit. Good. Let's do the next channel. Same thing now. In this case, the black point's all right, but we need to bring the white point over. Let's bring that over, right to where that begins to rise, and find the middle area. That seems about right. It really is just a visual guessing game. Notice how the red and green channels are starting to line up here. Let's go to blue, and we'll pull this in right to where that starts to rise. Find the midpoint. And at that point, we've done a really good job of fixing the color problems with this image. The original and the corrected. And the skin tones have really come back out. I'll go back to the composite RGB view and just make some subtle tweaks. We'll go ahead and pull the midtones up just a little bit. And I'll adjust the output levels to knock the whites down so they're not quite as hot. At that point, we can click OK. A quick toggle of the layer will show you the original and the new. And what we've discovered here is that layers can effectively be used as a color correction tool on top of just an exposure adjustment. This is why it's my favorite adjustment for fixing graphics for the television screen.